My name is Victoria Hill. I'm 28 years old, and I just watched my own father steal my $950,000 tech startup and hand it over to my unemployed brother Marcus, claiming he deserved the opportunity more because he had better leadership potential, only to discover that my years of coding had included a secret kill switch that would destroy them both at the moment they thought they had won. What they didn't know was that every line of code they stole contained my digital DNA, and their grand launch event was about to become the most spectacular public humiliation in Silicon Valley history. I've spent the last 3 years of my life building TechFlow solutions, from nothing more than an idea and my grandmother's $950,000 inheritance, creating a revolutionary data analytics platform that could predict market trends with 94% accuracy using machine learning algorithms I developed myself. This wasn't just a business. It was my life's work, my passion, and the culmination of everything I had learned during my computer science degree at MIT and my 2 years working at Google before striking out on my own. The company headquarters was a converted warehouse in downtown Austin that I had personally renovated, installing state-of-the-art servers, designing collaborative workspaces, and creating an environment where innovation could flourish. Every detail reflected my vision for what a technology company should be: transparent, ethical, and focused on solving real problems rather than just generating profit. I had recruited a team of 12 brilliant engineers and analysts who shared my commitment to excellence and my belief that data analytics could revolutionize how businesses make decisions. TechFlow's flagship product was something I called Predicticore, an artificial intelligence system that could analyze massive data sets from multiple sources and identify patterns that humans would never notice. The applications were endless. Retail companies could predict consumer behavior months in advance. Manufacturing firms could optimize their supply chains to prevent shortages, and financial institutions could identify market opportunities before their competitors even knew they existed. We had spent 18 months perfecting the algorithms, and we were finally ready to launch publicly after successfully beta testing with several major corporations. The breakthrough that would change everything came 6 months ago, when Predicticore successfully predicted the collapse of a major cryptocurrency exchange 3 weeks before it happened, saving our client $50 million in potential losses. Word spread quickly through the tech community, and suddenly every major investment firm and Fortune 500 company wanted to meet with us. We had scheduled presentations with Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, and Amazon, all of whom were interested in either licensing our technology or acquiring the company outright for what analysts estimated could be $15–20 million. But the success that should have been the pinnacle of my career became the catalyst for a family betrayal that would nearly destroy everything I had worked to build. My father, Harold Hill, was a successful businessman who owned a chain of electronics stores throughout Texas and had always positioned himself as my mentor and advisor. When I started TechFlow, he had been supportive and proud, often bragging to his friends about his daughter's entrepreneurial success and technological innovation. However, that support began to change as the company grew more successful and valuable. Harold started making suggestions about better ways to structure the business and opportunities for family involvement that made me increasingly uncomfortable. He would criticize my management decisions, question my hiring choices, and suggest that I needed more experienced leadership to take the company to the next level. The real problem was my younger brother Marcus, who was 25 years old and had never held a steady job or shown any interest in technology or business. Marcus had dropped out of college twice, failed at several entry-level positions, and had been living at home with our parents for the past 3 years while figuring out his direction in life. Despite his complete lack of achievement or motivation, our parents continued to support him financially and emotionally, while constantly making excuses for his failures. Have you ever watched a family member destroy every opportunity they're given while your parents continue to believe they just need the right chance to succeed? That's exactly what I had been observing with Marcus for years, as he squandered job opportunities, abandoned educational programs, and showed no interest in developing any marketable skills or work ethic. The contrast between Marcus's failures and my success created tension in our family that had been building for months. While I was working 80-hour weeks to build a revolutionary technology company, Marcus was sleeping until noon, playing video games, and expecting our parents to fund his lifestyle indefinitely. But instead of holding him accountable for his choices, our parents began suggesting that my success was somehow unfair and that I should help Marcus by involving him in my business. "Victoria," my mother Sandra would say during family dinners, "you've been so blessed with opportunities and success. Don't you think it would be wonderful if you could find a way to include Marcus in your company? He's been struggling to find his path, and maybe working with technology would give him the direction he needs." The suggestion that I should solve Marcus's employment problems by giving him a role in the company I had built from nothing was both insulting and impractical. Marcus had no technical skills, no business experience, and no demonstrated work ethic that would qualify him for any position at TechFlow. But more importantly, I had learned through years of observation that enabling Marcus's irresponsibility only made his problems worse, not better. "Mom," I would reply, trying to be diplomatic, "TechFlow is a highly technical company that requires specialized skills and experience. Marcus would need to develop significant expertise in data analytics, machine learning, or business development before he could contribute meaningfully to what we're doing." But my parents weren't interested in practical considerations or Marcus's lack of qualifications. They were focused on their belief that family should help family, regardless of merit or capability. The pressure to include Marcus in my business intensified as TechFlow became more successful and valuable, with my parents suggesting that I was being selfish and unsupportive by not creating opportunities for my struggling brother. The situation reached a crisis point 2 months ago when my father Harold made what he called a reasonable proposal that would solve Marcus's employment problems while keeping the business in the family. He suggested that I make Marcus a partner in TechFlow, giving him equity ownership and management authority over the company's operations, while I focused on the technical aspects of the business. "Victoria," Harold said during what he called a serious family business discussion, "you're brilliant with technology, but Marcus has natural leadership qualities that could really benefit your company. He understands people and business strategy in ways that complement your technical skills. You could be an incredible team." The proposal was so absurd that I initially thought Harold was joking. Marcus had never demonstrated any leadership qualities, business acumen, or people skills that would qualify him to manage anything, let alone a complex technology company. His longest employment period had been 6 months as a retail associate, a position he lost for showing up late and arguing with customers. "Dad," I said, trying to maintain respect while firmly rejecting his suggestion, "Marcus has no experience in technology, business management, or leadership. He's never successfully completed any significant project or held any position of responsibility. Making him a partner in TechFlow would be like making someone who has never driven a car the CEO of Ford Motor Company." But Harold wasn't deterred by logical arguments or practical considerations. He had convinced himself that Marcus's failures were due to a lack of opportunity rather than a lack of effort or capability, and he saw my successful company as the perfect solution to his son's employment problems. "Marcus just needs the right opportunity to show what he can do," Harold insisted, using the same excuse he had been making for Marcus's failures for years. "He's been waiting for a chance to prove himself, and your company could provide that chance. Besides, families should support each other, and you have the resources to help your brother succeed." The conversation revealed that Harold had fundamentally misunderstood both the nature of my business and the requirements for success in the technology industry. He was treating TechFlow like a family charity rather than a competitive business that required expertise, innovation, and relentless execution to survive and thrive. More troubling was his suggestion that I had an obligation to sacrifice my company's potential to solve Marcus's personal problems. He was asking me to risk everything I had built to enable my brother's continued avoidance of personal responsibility and professional development. "Dad," I said, ending the conversation with finality, "TechFlow is not a family employment program. It's a business that requires specific skills and qualifications that Marcus doesn't possess. I'm not going to jeopardize the company's future or my employees' livelihoods to create artificial opportunities for someone who hasn't earned them." The rejection of Harold's proposal marked the beginning of a campaign of pressure and manipulation that would ultimately escalate into outright theft of my company. What I didn't realize at the time was that Harold had already begun investigating ways to gain control of TechFlow without my consent, using his knowledge of my business structure and his influence over certain legal and financial aspects of the company's operations. The pressure from my family intensified dramatically after I rejected Harold's proposal to make Marcus a partner in TechFlow. What had started as suggestions and requests quickly escalated into demands and ultimatums, with my parents making it clear that they expected me to prioritize Marcus's needs over my own business judgment and professional responsibilities. "Victoria," my mother called me repeatedly over the following weeks, "your father is very disappointed in your attitude about helping Marcus. We raised you to be generous and supportive of family, but you're acting like Marcus is a stranger, instead of your brother who needs your help." The guilt and manipulation were relentless, with my parents characterizing my refusal to give Marcus unearned ownership of my company as evidence of selfishness and lack of family loyalty. They were treating my decision to maintain professional standards as a personal betrayal of family values, ignoring the fact that giving Marcus control over TechFlow would likely destroy the company and eliminate the jobs of 12 dedicated employees. But the most concerning development was Harold's increasingly detailed knowledge of TechFlow's business operations, financial structure, and legal arrangements. He began asking specific questions about our contracts, investor relationships, and corporate governance that went far beyond casual parental interest in my success. "Victoria," Harold said during one particularly uncomfortable family dinner, "I've been thinking about your company's legal structure, and I'm concerned that you might not have adequate protection if something happens to you or if you need additional capital for expansion. Maybe we should review your corporate documents to make sure everything is properly organized." The suggestion that my corporate structure might be inadequate was both insulting and suspicious, especially coming from someone whose business experience was limited to retail operations that bore no resemblance to a technology startup. But more troubling was his implication that I might need his help or oversight to manage my own company's legal affairs. "Dad," I replied, "TechFlow's legal structure was designed by corporate attorneys who specialize in technology companies. Our documents have been reviewed by multiple law firms, and our investors have completed extensive due diligence on our governance and compliance. We don't need additional review or restructuring." However, Harold's interest in my company's legal affairs wasn't academic or protective. It was predatory. Over the following weeks, I began receiving calls from vendors, contractors, and service providers asking about changes to TechFlow's corporate structure and authorization procedures. Someone had been making inquiries about my company's operations and legal arrangements, and the timing suggested that Harold was behind these investigations. The situation became critical when I discovered that Harold had been meeting with some of TechFlow's early investors and advisors, apparently discussing concerns about my leadership and suggesting that the company needed more experienced management to reach its potential. These conversations were happening without my knowledge or consent, and they were designed to undermine my authority and create support for changes in the company's leadership structure. "Victoria," one of my investors called me, "I've been having some interesting conversations with your father about TechFlow's strategic direction. He's raised some thoughtful questions about the company's growth trajectory and whether you might benefit from additional experienced leadership to help scale the business." The realization that Harold was actively working to undermine my position as CEO of my own company was devastating and infuriating. He was using his relationship with me to gain access to my investors and advisors, then poisoning those relationships with suggestions that I was inadequate or needed supervision to manage the business I had created from nothing. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was actively working to destroy your career and steal your achievements while pretending to support you? That's exactly what I was experiencing as Harold's campaign against my leadership became more aggressive and coordinated. The most shocking discovery came when my attorney called to inform me that someone had been requesting copies of TechFlow's corporate documents and attempting to identify potential vulnerabilities in the company's ownership structure and governance procedures. "Victoria," my attorney said during an emergency meeting, "someone has been conducting what appears to be a hostile takeover investigation of your company. They've been researching your corporate structure, investor agreements, and personal financial obligations in ways that suggest they're looking for leverage to force changes in the company's control or ownership. The investigation had been thorough and sophisticated, involving corporate attorneys and financial analysts who specialized in business acquisitions and restructuring. This wasn't casual curiosity or protective oversight. It was a calculated effort to identify ways to gain control of TechFlow against my wishes. "Do you have any idea who might be behind this investigation?" my attorney asked, though I suspected he already knew the answer based on his careful questioning about my family relationships and business discussions. "My father," I said, feeling sick as I realized the extent of Harold's betrayal. "He's been pressuring me to give Marcus ownership and control of the company, and he's been meeting with my investors to undermine my leadership. Now he's apparently investigating ways to force a takeover of my own business. The legal research revealed several concerning vulnerabilities in TechFlow's structure that Harold could potentially exploit to gain control of the company." As one of the early advisors who had helped me navigate certain regulatory and contractual requirements, Harold had signing authority on several key agreements that could theoretically be used to influence the company's operations or governance. More troubling was the discovery that Harold had co-signed certain lease agreements and equipment financing contracts during TechFlow's early stages, when my personal credit history wasn't sufficient to secure favorable terms. These co-signatures, which I had seen as helpful parental support, could potentially be used to claim partial ownership or control rights over the company's assets and operations. "Victoria," my attorney explained, "your father's co-signature on certain contracts could give him legal standing to claim that he's a partner or creditor with rights to influence the company's management. It's a complex legal situation that could take months to resolve through litigation, during which time your business operations could be severely disrupted." The realization that Harold had been positioning himself to steal my company from the very beginning was devastating. His early support and mentorship had actually been strategic moves to create legal leverage that he could use against me if I didn't comply with his demands to give Marcus control of TechFlow. But the most shocking revelation came when my head of engineering, David Chen, approached me with concerns about security breaches and unauthorized access attempts on our computer systems. "Victoria," David said during a confidential meeting, "we've detected several attempts to access our source code repositories and proprietary algorithms from external IP addresses. The attempts appear to be sophisticated and coordinated, suggesting that someone with knowledge of our systems is trying to steal our intellectual property. The cyber attacks on TechFlow's systems were particularly concerning, because they targeted the specific algorithms and code that made Predicticore revolutionary and valuable. Someone was trying to steal not just the company, but the actual technology that I had spent 3 years developing and perfecting. "Do we have any information about who might be behind these attacks?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect that Harold's investigation of my company extended beyond just legal and financial vulnerability assessment. "The attacks are being routed through proxy servers and VPNs to hide their origin," David explained. "But the timing and targets suggest that whoever is behind this has detailed knowledge of our system architecture and development priorities. This isn't random hacking. It's industrial espionage by someone who understands our technology. The combination of legal manipulation, investor interference, and technological theft revealed the extent of Harold's campaign to destroy my control over TechFlow and transfer ownership to Marcus. He wasn't just pressuring me to give up the company. He was actively working to steal it through whatever means necessary." As I processed the magnitude of Harold's betrayal, I realized that I needed to take immediate action to protect both my company and the innovative technology that represented years of my life's work. But I also began planning something that Harold and Marcus would never expect, a form of justice that would ensure they could never profit from their theft of my achievements. The revelation that Harold was conducting a systematic campaign to steal my company forced me to make the most difficult decision of my professional life. I could fight the legal battle and risk destroying TechFlow in the process, or I could appear to surrender while secretly preparing a response that would ensure Harold and Marcus could never truly succeed with what they were trying to steal. Over the following weeks, Harold's pressure campaign intensified, as he apparently sensed that his legal and financial leverage was giving him the upper hand in forcing me to surrender control of TechFlow. The conversations became more explicit about his expectations, and less concerned with maintaining the pretense that his actions were motivated by my best interests. "Victoria," Harold said during what he called a final family meeting about TechFlow's future, I've been reviewing your company's situation with my attorneys and advisors, and it's clear that you need more experienced leadership to take the business to the next level. Marcus has been working with business consultants to prepare for a leadership role, and we think it's time to make the transition official. The claim that Marcus had been working with business consultants was particularly absurd, given that he had spent the previous month playing video games and sleeping until noon. But Harold was no longer concerned with maintaining credible explanations for his demands. He was relying on legal leverage and family pressure to force compliance. "I'm not giving Marcus control of my company," I said firmly, though I could see that Harold was no longer interested in my consent or cooperation. "TechFlow is my business, built with my inheritance and my technology. Marcus has no qualifications or experience that would justify giving him leadership authority over a complex technology company." "Victoria," Harold replied, his tone becoming more threatening, "you need to understand that this isn't really your decision anymore. Based on my involvement in the company's early development and my co-signature on key contracts, my attorneys believe I have sufficient legal standing to force changes in TechFlow's management structure. You can cooperate voluntarily, or we can resolve this through the courts." The explicit threat of legal action revealed that Harold was prepared to destroy our family relationships and potentially damage TechFlow's business operations to achieve his goal of transferring control to Marcus. He was willing to risk everything to enable his son's continued avoidance of personal responsibility and professional development. But what Harold didn't know was that I had been preparing for exactly this scenario since discovering his investigation into TechFlow's vulnerabilities. While he was focused on legal and financial leverage, I had been implementing technical safeguards that would ensure the company's most valuable assets, the proprietary algorithms and source code, could never be used against me. "Dad," I said, appearing to consider his ultimatum while actually buying time to complete my preparations. "I need some time to think about this and consult with my own attorneys. This is a major decision that will affect my entire career and the future of everyone who works for TechFlow." "You have 1 week," Harold replied, apparently satisfied that he had finally broken my resistance. "After that, we'll proceed with legal action to enforce my rights as a partner and creditor of the company. Marcus is ready to take over operations immediately." The week that followed was the most intense and secretive period of my professional life, as I worked around the clock to implement security measures and contingency plans that would protect TechFlow's intellectual property while appearing to comply with Harold's demands. Every line of code I had written over the past 3 years contained my digital signature and biometric authentication requirements that I had never disclosed to anyone, including my own engineering team. Have you ever been forced to watch someone steal your life's work, while secretly preparing a response that would destroy them at the moment of their greatest triumph? That's exactly what I was doing as I prepared to surrender control of TechFlow, while ensuring that Harold and Marcus would never be able to profit from their theft. The most critical component of my preparation was something I called the Authenticity Protocol, a sophisticated security system embedded in Predicticore's core algorithms that required biometric authentication from me personally to function properly. Without my voice recognition, fingerprint, and retinal scan, the system would appear to work normally during basic testing, but would catastrophically fail during any significant demonstration or real-world application. "David," I said to my head of engineering during a confidential meeting, "I need you to help me implement some enhanced security features in Predicticore without documenting the changes in our standard development logs. These features are designed to prevent unauthorized use of our technology if the company is ever compromised." David understood immediately what I was preparing for, and he supported the decision to protect our intellectual property from theft. "Victoria, the team has been worried about what's happening with your family's pressure to change the company's leadership. We all know that Marcus has no qualifications to run TechFlow, and we're concerned about what will happen to our work if he gains control. The loyalty and support from my engineering team was incredibly meaningful, especially as I faced the prospect of losing control of the company we had built together. These were brilliant professionals who had chosen to work for TechFlow because they believed in our mission and respected my leadership, and they were willing to help protect our shared achievements from people who didn't understand or deserve them. Over the course of that week, I also began having confidential conversations with TechFlow's investors and potential clients, providing them with detailed documentation of Harold's attempted takeover and Marcus's complete lack of qualifications for any leadership role in a technology company. I want you to be aware that my family is attempting to force changes in TechFlow's management that could significantly impact the company's ability to deliver on our commitments and continue our innovation. I explained to each investor and client. The person they want to install as CEO has no experience in technology, business management, or leadership of any kind. The investors' reactions were uniformly supportive of my position and concerned about the potential impact of unqualified leadership on their investments. Several indicated that they would withdraw their funding and support if Marcus gained control of the company, which would effectively destroy TechFlow's financial viability and growth prospects. But my most important preparation during that week was creating what I privately called TechFlow 2.0, a new company that would be ready to launch immediately with my original team, our key clients, and improved versions of all the technology we had developed. While Harold and Marcus were focused on stealing the existing business, I was preparing to make that theft meaningless by creating something better and more valuable. At the end of the week, I met with Harold to discuss what appeared to be my surrender to his demands, while actually setting in motion a series of events that would destroy his plans and expose his theft to everyone who mattered in the technology industry. "Dad," I said during our final negotiation, "I've decided to accept your proposal and transfer operational control of TechFlow to Marcus. I'll retain my technical role and continue developing our algorithms, but he can handle the business management and strategic direction." Harold's satisfaction was obvious as he believed he had finally succeeded in stealing my company and creating an executive position for Marcus that he had never earned or deserved. "Victoria, you're making the right decision for everyone involved. Marcus is going to do great things with TechFlow, and you'll be able to focus on what you do best without the stress of business management." The agreement we signed that day gave Marcus CEO authority and operational control over TechFlow, while theoretically preserving my role as Chief Technology Officer. But what Harold didn't understand was that without my continued cooperation and authentication, the technology that made TechFlow valuable would become worthless, regardless of who held the corporate titles. As I cleaned out my office and prepared to watch Marcus take control of the company I had built from nothing, I felt a mixture of sadness and anticipation that I had never experienced before. I was losing something precious, but I was also about to deliver justice in a way that would be both perfectly legal and absolutely devastating to the people who had betrayed me. The transition of power at TechFlow was swift and humiliating, as Marcus immediately demonstrated that he had no understanding of the company's operations, technology, or business relationships. Within days of assuming the CEO role, he had alienated key employees, confused important clients, and revealed his complete ignorance of the data analytics industry. "Victoria," Marcus said during his first week as CEO, "I've been reviewing our technology, and I think we need to simplify our algorithms to make them more accessible to average users. This artificial intelligence stuff is too complicated for most businesses to understand or use effectively." The suggestion that we should simplify machine learning algorithms that had taken 3 years to develop revealed Marcus's fundamental misunderstanding of both our technology and our target market. Our clients were sophisticated corporations that needed advanced analytics capabilities, not simplified tools for casual users. "Marcus," I replied, maintaining the pretense of cooperation while documenting his incompetence, "Predicticore's complexity is what makes it valuable. Our algorithms can identify patterns and predict trends that simpler systems would miss completely. Simplifying them would eliminate their competitive advantage." But Marcus wasn't interested in understanding the technology or learning about the industry he was now supposed to lead. He was focused on making changes that would establish his authority and demonstrate his leadership, regardless of their impact on the company's effectiveness or client relationships. "I'm the CEO now," Marcus said, revealing his true priorities. "And I think I know what's best for this company. We're going to make TechFlow more user-friendly and accessible, even if that means changing some of the technical aspects you developed." The arrogance and ignorance in his response confirmed everything I had suspected about his motivations and capabilities. He saw TechFlow as a trophy that proved his success rather than a complex business that required expertise and dedication to manage effectively. Harold was equally revealing in his approach to his new role as what he called executive chairman of TechFlow. He immediately began making grand plans for expansion and growth that demonstrated his complete misunderstanding of the technology industry and our competitive position. Victoria, Harold announced during a company meeting. We're going to take TechFlow national within 6 months. I've been talking to investors about opening offices in Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, and we're going to franchise our technology to smaller consulting firms across Texas. The franchise model he proposed was completely inappropriate for a technology company that depended on proprietary algorithms and specialized expertise. Our competitive advantage came from our unique intellectual property and our team's deep understanding of data analytics, neither of which could be replicated through franchising arrangements. But the most disturbing aspect of Marcus and Harold's takeover was their decision to schedule a grand launch event to introduce their revolutionary technology to the broader business community. They were planning to present my algorithms and innovations as their own achievements, while I watched from the sidelines as a marginalized technical employee. We're going to hold the launch event at the downtown Marriott, Marcus announced with obvious excitement. We'll invite 300 investors, potential clients, and business leaders to see what TechFlow can do. This will be our coming out party as a major player in the Texas technology scene. Have you ever watched someone plan to take credit for your life's work, while you sat quietly knowing they were about to face the most humiliating failure of their lives? That's exactly what I was experiencing as Marcus and Harold organized their launch event, without understanding that their stolen technology contained safeguards that would expose their theft at the worst possible moment. The launch event planning revealed the extent of their delusions about their own capabilities and their complete ignorance of the technology they were trying to present. Marcus had no understanding of how Predicticore worked, how to demonstrate its capabilities, or how to answer technical questions from sophisticated investors and clients. Victoria, Marcus said a week before the launch event, I need you to prepare a technical demonstration that I can present to the audience. Make it simple and impressive. Something that will show off our artificial intelligence capabilities without getting too complicated. The request that I create a demonstration of my own stolen technology for Marcus to present as his own achievement was both insulting and perfect for my purposes. I prepared exactly what he asked for. A simple, impressive demonstration that would work flawlessly until the moment when biometric authentication was required, at which point it would catastrophically fail and reveal the truth about who had actually created TechFlow's revolutionary algorithms. I've prepared a live demonstration of Predicticore's predictive capabilities, I told Marcus, providing him with presentation materials that would lead directly to his public humiliation. The system will analyze real-time market data and make predictions about stock prices, cryptocurrency trends, and commodity futures. It's exactly the kind of impressive demonstration that will show investors what our technology can do. Marcus was thrilled with the demonstration I had prepared, never suspecting that it was designed to expose his theft at the moment of his greatest triumph. He spent hours rehearsing the presentation, memorizing talking points about artificial intelligence and machine learning that he didn't understand, and preparing to take credit for innovations that were entirely my creation. Meanwhile, I had been having confidential conversations with the investors and business leaders who would be attending the launch event, providing them with detailed documentation of the theft and preparing them to witness Marcus's inevitable failure. I want you to understand what you're going to see at tomorrow's launch event, I explained to key investors during private meetings. The person presenting will be taking credit for technology he didn't create, using algorithms he doesn't understand, and demonstrating capabilities he couldn't replicate if his life depended on it. The investors were shocked by the evidence of Harold and Marcus's theft, and several confirmed that they were prepared to take immediate action if the launch event proceeded as I had predicted. They were also interested in my plans for TechFlow 2.0 and the improved technology I had been developing independently. The night before the launch event, I made final preparations for what would be either the most satisfying or most devastating moment of my professional life, depending on whether my technical safeguards worked as intended, and whether justice would finally be served for Harold and Marcus's betrayal. As I prepared for bed on the night before Marcus's launch event, I felt a calm certainty that tomorrow would bring either vindication or disaster, but that either way, the truth about TechFlow's creation would finally be revealed to everyone who mattered in the Austin technology community. The morning of Marcus's launch event dawned clear and bright, with perfect weather for what he expected to be his triumphant debut as a technology CEO, and what I knew would be his devastating exposure as a fraud and thief. I arrived at the downtown Marriott early, not as a welcome participant, but as an uninvited observer watching from the parking lot through the event's live stream on my laptop. The ballroom was elegantly decorated with TechFlow banners and promotional materials that featured Marcus's photograph and Harold's corporate biography, with my name relegated to small print in the technical team listings. 300 investors, business leaders, journalists, and family members had gathered to witness what they believed would be the introduction of revolutionary data analytics technology, unaware that they were about to see one of the most spectacular corporate failures in Austin business history. Harold and Marcus worked the room during the cocktail reception, accepting congratulations for their innovative leadership and breakthrough technology, while my parents beamed with pride from their front row seats. The irony of watching my own family celebrate the theft of my life's work was both painful and motivating as I prepared to witness their humiliation unfold in real time. Ladies and gentlemen, Harold took the stage as the formal presentation began. Welcome to the future of data analytics. What you're about to see will revolutionize how businesses predict market trends, understand consumer behavior, and make strategic decisions. TechFlow Solutions represents the next generation of artificial intelligence, developed by our brilliant team under the visionary leadership of our CEO, Marcus Hill. The introduction was everything I had expected. Grandiose claims about revolutionary technology delivered by someone who had no understanding of what he was presenting. Harold's confidence was obvious as he basked in the applause and prepared to hand the stage over to Marcus for the technical demonstration. Thank you all for being here today, Marcus said as he took the microphone, his nervousness barely concealed beneath his rehearsed presentation style. I'm excited to show you what we've accomplished with Predicticore, our flagship artificial intelligence platform that can predict market movements with unprecedented accuracy. The presentation began smoothly, with Marcus delivering the talking points I had prepared for him about machine learning algorithms and predictive analytics. The audience was engaged and impressed, particularly as he described Predicticore's 94% accuracy rate and its successful prediction of the cryptocurrency exchange collapse that had saved our client $50 million. Now, I'd like to demonstrate our technology with a live analysis of current market conditions, Marcus announced, approaching the laptop connected to the ballroom's large display screens. Predicticore will analyze real-time data from multiple sources and provide predictions about stock prices, cryptocurrency trends, and commodity futures over the next 30 days. This was the moment I had been preparing for over the past month, the point where Marcus would attempt to access the core functionality of Predicticore and discover that the technology he had stolen was protected by biometric authentication systems that only I could satisfy. Have you ever watched someone walk confidently toward their own destruction while believing they were about to achieve their greatest triumph? That's exactly what I was witnessing as Marcus approached the moment when my hidden security protocols would expose his theft to 300 witnesses and a live stream audience. Marcus clicked the demonstration button with obvious confidence, expecting to see Predicticore's sophisticated analysis interface appear on the screens throughout the ballroom. Instead, the system immediately prompted for biometric authentication, voice recognition, fingerprint scan, and retinal verification, requirements that Marcus had never seen before and could never satisfy. Marcus stammered, clearly confused by the unexpected authentication requirements. There seems to be some kind of security protocol that wasn't there during our testing. Let me try to bypass this login screen. The technical difficulty was obvious to everyone in the audience, particularly the sophisticated investors and technology executives who understood that authentication failures usually indicated either security breaches or unauthorized access attempts. Marcus's inability to access his own company's flagship product was raising immediate questions about his technical competence and legitimate authority. "Is there a problem with the demonstration?" called out David Morrison, a prominent venture capital partner who had been one of my original investors. Authentication protocols usually indicate that someone is trying to access a system they're not authorized to use. The question hit exactly the issue I had hoped someone would raise. Marcus's failure to authenticate with Predicticore was evidence that he wasn't the system's legitimate user or creator, which contradicted everything he had been claiming about his leadership role in developing the technology. No problem, Marcus replied, his confidence clearly shaken as he attempted various workarounds to bypass the authentication requirements. This is just a minor technical glitch that we can resolve quickly. But the authentication system was designed to detect and respond to bypass attempts by displaying increasingly explicit warnings about unauthorized access and theft. As Marcus continued his efforts to circumvent the security protocols, the screens throughout the ballroom began showing messages that would destroy his credibility forever. Warning: unauthorized access attempt detected, appeared across all displays in bold red letters. System designed by Victoria Hill. Biometric authentication required for legitimate use. The message was clear and devastating, identifying me as the system's creator and Marcus as an unauthorized user attempting to access technology he had no right to use. The audience erupted in murmurs of confusion and concern as they began to understand what they were witnessing. But the security system wasn't finished exposing the truth about TechFlow's theft. As Marcus made increasingly desperate attempts to access Predicticore, the displays began showing detailed information about the system's development history, my role as its creator, and the timeline of Harold and Marcus's acquisition of the company through legal manipulation rather than legitimate business development. Predicticore developed by Victoria Hill 2021-2024 scrolled across the screens. Algorithms created using inheritance from grandmother. Company stolen through legal manipulation by Harold Hill and Marcus Hill. The revelations were comprehensive and damaging, providing the audience with a complete understanding of how Marcus had gained control of technology he hadn't created and couldn't operate. The sophisticated investors and business leaders in attendance immediately understood that they were witnessing corporate fraud and intellectual property theft, rather than a legitimate product demonstration. "This is unprecedented," said Jennifer Walsh, a technology journalist who had been covering Austin's startup scene for years. "I've never seen a product demonstration reveal that the presenter had stolen the technology they were trying to showcase. The final component of my security system was the most dramatic and satisfying element of Marcus's public humiliation. Instead of simply failing to work, Predicticore began displaying a comprehensive presentation about its actual development history, including photos of me working in my original laboratory, documentation of my grandmother's inheritance that had funded the research, and video testimonials from my engineering team describing my leadership and innovation. Meet the real creator of Predicticore appeared across all screens, followed by a professionally produced video that I had created specifically for this moment. The video showed me explaining the mathematical principles behind the predictive algorithms, demonstrating the machine learning techniques I had developed, and describing the 3 years of work that had gone into creating TechFlow's revolutionary technology. The contrast between my obvious expertise and Marcus's complete ignorance was stark and undeniable. While he stood on stage unable to access his own company's flagship product, the screens were showing detailed evidence of my technical capabilities and creative leadership in developing every aspect of the system he was claiming to have created. The audience reaction was immediate and dramatic. Investors began talking urgently among themselves. Journalists started taking notes and asking questions, and several prominent business leaders stood up and walked toward the exits. The launch event that was supposed to establish Marcus and Harold as major players in the technology industry was instead exposing them as frauds and thieves in the most public way possible. "This is corporate fraud," announced Robert Chen, managing partner of Austin Ventures and one of the city's most respected technology investors. "What we're seeing here is clear evidence that Marcus Hill has stolen intellectual property and is attempting to profit from technology he didn't create." Harold attempted to regain control of the situation by taking the microphone and trying to minimize the significance of what everyone had just witnessed. "There seems to be some technical confusion about our development team and corporate structure," Harold said, his voice betraying his panic despite his attempts to appear calm. "Marcus has been leading TechFlow's strategic direction, and there may be some authentication issues related to our security protocols." But his explanation was contradicted by the continuing display of evidence on the screens throughout the ballroom. The security system I had designed was methodically presenting documentation of the theft, including copies of the legal documents Harold had used to gain control of the company, recordings of conversations where he had threatened legal action, and financial records showing how he had leveraged his co-signatures to force my surrender of TechFlow. The comprehensive nature of the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, leaving no room for Harold and Marcus to claim that the situation was a misunderstanding or technical error. Everyone in attendance could see that they had attempted to steal my technology and present it as their own achievement, only to be exposed by the very security systems I had built into my innovations. As the launch event dissolved into chaos and recriminations, I felt a satisfaction that was both professional and deeply personal. Justice was finally being served for the betrayal and theft I had endured, and everyone who mattered in the Austin technology community now understood the truth about TechFlow's creation and Marcus's complete lack of qualifications for the role he had assumed. The aftermath of Marcus's catastrophic launch event was swift and comprehensive, as the technology community, investors, and business media reacted to the spectacular revelation of corporate fraud they had just witnessed. Within hours, the story was spreading throughout Austin's business circles and beyond, establishing Marcus and Harold as cautionary examples of how theft and deception inevitably lead to public humiliation and professional destruction. The investors who had attended the launch event were the first to take action, with several immediately demanding meetings with Harold to discuss the fraud they had witnessed and the implications for their potential investments in TechFlow. The sophisticated venture capital partners and corporate executives who had been considering significant financial commitments were now focused on protecting themselves from association with what was clearly a fraudulent business operation. "Harold," David Morrison called within hours of the failed demonstration, "we need to meet immediately to discuss what happened at today's launch event. Based on what we witnessed, it appears that TechFlow's technology was stolen from Victoria Hill, and Marcus has no legitimate claim to the intellectual property your company is trying to commercialize." The investor calls were uniformly hostile and threatening, with sophisticated business leaders making it clear that they would not tolerate association with corporate fraud or intellectual property theft. Several indicated that they were prepared to take legal action if Harold and Marcus attempted to use their names or claim their support for TechFlow's stolen technology. Meanwhile, the business media coverage was devastating and comprehensive, with technology journalists and business reporters providing detailed accounts of the failed launch event and the evidence of theft that had been revealed through my security systems. The story was particularly compelling because it involved clear evidence of corporate fraud combined with sophisticated technical countermeasures that had exposed the criminals at the moment of their intended triumph. "Austin Technology Fraud Exposed by Victims' Hidden Security Systems," read the headline in the Austin Business Journal. Marcus Hill's attempt to demonstrate stolen artificial intelligence software backfired spectacularly when the system revealed its true creator and the theft that had enabled his acquisition of TechFlow solutions. The media coverage included detailed analysis of the technical evidence that had been displayed during the failed demonstration, with technology experts explaining how my biometric authentication systems and embedded security protocols had been designed to prevent unauthorized use of the stolen algorithms. The sophistication of my countermeasures was being praised as an innovative approach to protecting intellectual property from corporate theft. But the most significant consequence of the launch event disaster was the immediate collapse of TechFlow's business operations and commercial prospects. The clients who had been considering major contracts with the company were now canceling their negotiations and exploring alternatives, while existing clients were demanding explanations and assurances about the legitimacy of the technology they had been using. "Victoria," my former client at Goldman Sachs, called me directly. "We need to understand what's happening with TechFlow and whether the predictive analytics we've been using are legitimate. Based on today's events, it appears that you were the actual creator of the technology we've been licensing. Have you ever experienced the satisfaction of watching your stolen achievements be returned to you by people who now understood the truth about who had created them?" That's exactly what was happening as my former clients reached out to me directly, recognizing that I was the legitimate source of the technology they valued and wanted to continue using. The client calls were uniformly supportive and interested in continuing their relationships with me personally, rather than with the fraudulent company that Marcus and Harold had created. Several indicated that they had suspected something was wrong when Marcus had proven unable to answer technical questions or provide modifications to the algorithms they were using. We always wondered why Marcus seemed so unfamiliar with the technology during our meetings, explained Sarah Martinez, the Chief Technology Officer at Dell Technologies. Now we understand that he was trying to represent innovations he hadn't created and didn't understand. We'd like to discuss transitioning our contract to work directly with you. The transition of clients from TechFlow to my new company was seamless and immediate, as sophisticated technology users recognized that I was the legitimate source of the innovations they needed. Within a week of the failed launch event, I had recovered not only my stolen technology, but also the business relationships that Harold and Marcus had been trying to claim as their own achievements. The legal consequences for Harold and Marcus were also swift and severe, as multiple parties took action to recover their investments, protect their interests, and hold the perpetrators accountable for their fraud. The evidence that had been displayed during the launch event provided clear documentation of intellectual property theft, corporate fraud, and securities violations that attracted attention from both civil attorneys and law enforcement agencies. Victoria, my attorney called me. We've been contacted by the Texas Attorney General's office about potential criminal charges against your father and brother. The fraud they committed was so blatant and well documented that prosecutors are interested in making this a test case for corporate intellectual property theft. Then, the criminal investigation was moving rapidly, with prosecutors focusing on Harold's use of legal manipulation and false documentation to steal TechFlow and Marcus's knowing participation in presenting stolen technology as his own creation. The evidence from the launch event, combined with the financial and legal documentation I had been collecting, provided a compelling case for multiple felony charges. But beyond the legal consequences, the most satisfying aspect of the aftermath was watching Harold and Marcus face the reality that their theft had not only failed, but had destroyed their reputations and credibility in ways that would affect them for years to come. Marcus's humiliation was particularly complete, as he had been exposed as incompetent and fraudulent in front of 300 witnesses and a live-stream audience that included many of Austin's most influential business leaders. His attempt to establish himself as a technology CEO had instead revealed him as someone who couldn't even access the systems he claimed to have developed. Victoria, Marcus called me a week after the launch event, his voice completely different from the arrogant tone he had used when stealing my company. I need to talk to you about what happened. I think there might be some kind of misunderstanding about my role at TechFlow. The attempt to characterize his deliberate theft and fraud as a misunderstanding was typical of Marcus's approach to avoiding responsibility for his actions. But the evidence of his crimes was too comprehensive and public for him to escape consequences through manipulation or excuses. Marcus, I replied, there's no misunderstanding. You and Dad stole my company, fired me from the business I created, and attempted to take credit for technology you didn't develop and couldn't operate. Now, you're facing the consequences of those choices. Harold's reaction was more aggressive, but equally futile, as he attempted to blame me for the failure of their theft, rather than accepting responsibility for the crimes they had committed. Victoria, Harold called me repeatedly, you sabotaged the launch event and destroyed TechFlow's reputation. You could have worked with us to make this transition successful, but instead you chose to humiliate your own family in public. The accusation that I had sabotaged my own stolen technology was so absurd that it revealed Harold's complete inability to understand that authentic innovation cannot be separated from its creator. He had assumed that stealing the corporate structure would give them access to the intellectual property, never realizing that the technology itself contained safeguards that would prevent unauthorized use. As the dust settled from the launch event disaster, I found myself in the unexpected position of having not only recovered my stolen technology, but having gained additional credibility and business opportunities as a result of the dramatic way the truth had been revealed. 6 months after Marcus's catastrophic launch event, the transformation in my professional and personal life was so comprehensive that I could hardly believe how much had changed since the day Harold first suggested that Marcus deserved control of my company. TechFlow 2.0, the new company I had quietly prepared while watching Harold and Marcus steal my original business, had become one of Austin's most successful technology startups, with innovative algorithms that surpassed even my original Predicticore system. The new company's success was built on the relationships and reputation I had developed over years of honest work and authentic innovation, combined with the enhanced credibility that came from having my integrity validated in such a dramatic and public way. The investors, clients, and employees who had witnessed my victimization and vindication were eager to support my new venture and distance themselves from the fraud they had seen Harold and Marcus attempt. "Victoria," Robert Chen of Austin Ventures said during our first meeting about TechFlow 2.0, "what happened at that launch event was the most convincing demonstration of authentic innovation and technical integrity I've ever witnessed. We'd like to lead a Series A funding round that will give you the resources to scale your improved algorithms nationally." The funding round closed at $8 million, providing TechFlow 2.0 with more capital than I had ever imagined possible during the early days of my original company. The investors were not only providing money, but also strategic guidance and business connections that accelerated our growth beyond anything I could have achieved independently. But more satisfying than the financial success was the restoration of my reputation and the recognition of my achievements by the technology community that had witnessed my victimization and vindication. The story of how I had protected my intellectual property through embedded security systems had become legendary among Austin entrepreneurs, establishing me as both a technical innovator and a strategic thinker who could protect her achievements from theft. Victoria Hill's response to corporate theft has become a case study in how authentic innovators can protect their intellectual property, wrote TechCrunch in a feature article about my experience. Her use of biometric authentication and embedded security protocols to prevent unauthorized use of stolen algorithms represents a new standard for protecting innovation in an era of increasing corporate fraud. The media coverage of my story had attracted attention from technology companies, universities, and law enforcement agencies interested in learning from my approach to intellectual property protection. I had begun speaking at conferences and consulting with other entrepreneurs about how to safeguard their innovations from family members or business partners who might attempt theft. Meanwhile, the legal consequences for Harold and Marcus had continued to escalate as prosecutors and civil attorneys pursued multiple avenues for holding them accountable for their fraud. Harold's use of legal manipulation to steal my company had resulted in criminal charges for corporate fraud, while Marcus's knowing participation in presenting stolen technology had led to charges related to securities fraud and intellectual property theft. "Your father has been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for corporate fraud and intellectual property theft," my attorney updated me on the criminal case. Marcus received 3 years for securities fraud and conspiracy. Both sentences include restitution requirements that will ensure they spend years paying back the damages they caused. The prison sentences were appropriate consequences for the magnitude of their crimes, but more importantly, they established legal precedents that would deter similar theft attempts by other people who might think they could steal intellectual property from family members without facing serious consequences. Harold's electronics store business had collapsed during the criminal investigation, as customers and suppliers learned about his involvement in corporate fraud and decided they couldn't trust someone who would steal from his own daughter. The financial consequences of his crimes extended far beyond the criminal penalties, to encompass the destruction of his professional legacy and business relationships. Marcus's situation was even more dire, as his complete lack of legitimate skills or experience left him with no viable career options after serving his prison sentence. The technology industry that he had briefly imagined himself leading would never trust him with any significant responsibilities, while his demonstrated incompetence and criminal behavior made him unemployable in most other fields. But the most meaningful consequence of their crimes was the impact on our family relationships and their understanding of the damage they had caused through their betrayal and theft. "Victoria," my mother called me a year after the launch event disaster, "I want you to know that your father and I finally understand what we did to you and how wrong we were to support Harold and Marcus's theft of your company. We're ashamed of our behavior and grateful that you had the strength to protect yourself from people who should have been supporting you." The acknowledgement from my mother was significant because it represented recognition that Harold and Marcus's actions had been criminal rather than simply misguided, and that my response had been necessary rather than vindictive. She was finally understanding that authentic family support requires respect for each other's achievements, rather than expectations that successful members should sacrifice for unsuccessful ones. Have you ever received an apology that validated everything you had endured and confirmed that your difficult decisions had been correct? That's exactly what I experienced as my family gradually acknowledged the truth about Harold and Marcus's crimes and my justified response to their betrayal. The technology that Harold and Marcus had tried to steal continued to evolve and improve under my leadership, with TechFlow 2.0's enhanced algorithms achieving accuracy rates that exceeded even my original Predicticore system. The innovations that they had assumed they could claim as their own had proven impossible to replicate without my continued involvement and creativity. Our new predictive models are achieving 97% accuracy in market trend analysis, my head of engineering reported during our quarterly review. The improvements you've made to the machine learning algorithms have created capabilities that are years ahead of anything our competitors can offer. The technical advancement represented not only professional success, but also personal vindication of my belief that authentic innovation cannot be separated from its creator. Harold and Marcus had assumed that stealing the corporate structure would give them access to the intellectual property, but they had learned that true innovation requires ongoing creativity and expertise that cannot be stolen or transferred. The clients who had briefly been confused by Marcus's theft had returned to work directly with me, often with expanded contracts and enhanced trust based on their experience witnessing my integrity under pressure. The business relationships that Harold and Marcus had tried to claim as their own achievements had proven to be based on respect for my personal capabilities, rather than loyalty to any particular corporate entity. Victoria, the CEO of Microsoft's AI division, said during a recent meeting, "We'd like to discuss acquiring TechFlow 2.0's algorithms for integration into our enterprise software suite. Based on our experience with your technology and your demonstrated integrity, we believe a partnership with you would benefit both companies." The acquisition discussions represented opportunities that far exceeded anything I had imagined during the early days of my original company, validation that protecting my intellectual property had ultimately led to greater success than enabling its theft would have produced. As I reflected on the journey from Harold's initial suggestion that Marcus deserved my company to the current success of TechFlow 2.0, I realized that their betrayal had ultimately strengthened my resolve, enhanced my reputation, and forced me to develop capabilities I might never have discovered otherwise. The security systems I had developed to protect my intellectual property from theft had become innovations in their own right, with other companies licensing my authentication protocols to protect their own proprietary technologies. The experience of recovering from corporate fraud had made me a more sophisticated entrepreneur and a more effective leader. But most importantly, I had learned that authentic achievements cannot be stolen, that true innovation requires ongoing creativity and commitment, and that people who try to claim others' successes will inevitably be exposed when they cannot replicate the capabilities they have stolen. If you're reading this and you're dealing with family members or business partners who expect you to sacrifice your achievements for their benefit, please know that you have the right to protect what you've created. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones most likely to feel entitled to our success, but that entitlement does not create legitimate claims to our intellectual property or business achievements. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for protecting innovation and maintaining the integrity that makes authentic success possible. Refusing to enable others' theft of your achievements isn't cruel. It's essential for ensuring that creativity and hard work are rewarded rather than exploited. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to protect your achievements from family members who felt entitled to claim them? How did you handle situations where people close to you expected you to sacrifice your success for their benefit? Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar challenges. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that your innovations and achievements are worth protecting, even when that protection requires difficult decisions about family relationships. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.